r/AskReddit. People with home security cameras. What's the creepiest thing you've ever seen happen while you were asleep? Wasn't asleep, but when I lived with my ex, we had a few security cameras and they send you alerts when there's motion detected. I was at work and got an alert that there was motion in the living room and I figured it was my ex coming home early, but I checked it anyway. Instead, I saw my dog standing in the middle of the living room staring at the wall. He stood there for a minute and then got on the sofa to sleep. Two things were terrifyingly off about that one. My dog was a puppy at the time and was crated when home alone. The crate is made of solid wood, metal grates and has thick and heavy eye/hooked latches, so there's no conceivable way he could have opened the door too. He was kept in the office, which is located off the hall, and we kept the door separating the living room from the hall closed during the day to keep the room cooler for him. I looked back at the recording because I was very confused and unfortunately, because the hall door was closed I couldn't see how his crate got opened. But the hall door opened on its own, and he walked out into the living room about 30 seconds later. The hall door was like a regular bedroom door. It closed with a knob/latch and wouldn't have opened even if you pushed on it. There were no sounds aside from the normal house noises. No cars or people had been in view of the outside cameras since we'd left, and no other motion detections had went off. When I was a poor college student, my wealthy cousin and his wife went on vacation and offered to let me house sit to give me a break from my 3 slovenly roommates. They live a few towns over in a very nice house with a huge front lawn and a fancy, tall iron fence and double gates. The fence and gates are about 11 feet high. You have to have a remote to open the gates. That first night I slept so well. I breakfasted like a king and then drove to school. I got back around 5, made a supper fit for a king, and settled down to write an econ paper. My cousin has a warning system for when someone drives, turns off the road, and comes up to the gate. There's a chiming sound and you can look at screens in a couple of different rooms to see who it is, so that you can buzz them in. I was deep into my paper when I heard the chime. I was confused at first and checked my phone before I realized what it was. I looked from the sofa and could see a movement on the security screen. I stood up and got closer and had a clear view of 2 women getting out of a white car. One tried to squeeze between 2 bars of the gate. Impossible. And then the other woman tried to boost her over the top of the gate. Hilarious. The top one fell, and even from the house I could heard swearing. I was about to press the intercom button and ask WTF was their problem, but I was chuckling at their antics and so just watched silently. They peered at the house intently from between the bars like a couple of jailbirds for a while. The skinnier one actually stripped down to her bra and panties and tried to squeeze through the bars again. No dice. Butt and boobs were not allowing that to happen. More swearing. Then as the skinny one got dressed again, the bigger one went back to her trunk and got out a fucking tire iron. As soon as she started fucking with the hinges of the gate I was on 911. The cops took too long and the women left. I showed the cops the video, but they couldn't get a license plate number. When my cousin and his wife returned the next week I told them what happened and we watched the tape. He said that he had no idea who the women were, but his wife looked pissed. I packed up, thanked them for my vacation and left. She divorced him that summer. So I'm sitting in my living room at night. Just recently moved into my new flat. I'm in a basement flat, own entrance, in a little townhouse on the edge of town. Quiet area, lots of trees, cheap rent and like no public transport or cell reception. I'm living alone for the first time. I'd just set up the security cameras and hooked them up to a new monitor. The old one was ancient and gigantic. Hadn't figured out where to put the monitor. I'd never had a security system before. It was, at the time, on my work desk, which was at the living room window. I noticed this slight yellow glow out the window out the corner of my eyes, slowly getting brighter. As it does, I notice on the camera that there's a huge ass shadow cast across my door, visible from camera, to the left of the window, that looks kinda animal but weird proportions. I quietly shit myself. It sits there for a while, like a good 10 minutes, moving just enough to make me wonder if I'm imagining it moving. There's a kind of whining/buzzing noise, but it's faint, and I might be imagining it. I suddenly find religion. Then all of a sudden there's a loud pop from inside my building. The glow goes instantly away. There's a sound like a really pissed cat, and then really rapid footsteps. I'm in like full cardiac arrest at this point, bathing in my own urine, crying for my mum. Flash forward a week or so, I haven't been eaten by a cat shadow monster, though I do have a sudden new interest in exorcisms. I meet the upstairs neighbors, older couple, when they're having trouble getting a large package up the stairs. They offer me tea as thanks. I notice their cat sitting in the window. Its movement reminds me of something, and after a while I realize it's the shadow monster. I ask a few questions to round out the details. Turns out the neighbors had one of those lights on a sensor which turn on when they detect movement. Cat jumps up to ledge, light turns on. But it was an eco light, so warmed up slow. It then went out loudly. I'm too embarrassed/relieved to recount the story, so I make my excuses, leaving the nice couple upstairs with the impression that their new downstairs neighbor is a weirdo who stares at cats, has a really keen interest in light bulbs, and a predilection for nervous laughter. They don't invite me up for tea anymore, but they do ask if I'm okay every time they see me. My parents live on an L-shaped large piece of property with a dirt road that runs along the inside corner of the L. My dad walked out of the house very early one morning on his way to work and sees someone pull off the dirt road onto the opposite end of their property. Before he can get in his truck to investigate, the trespassers peel out and take off the opposite direction and he can't catch them. He goes to work suspecting poachers and gets a trail camera to attach to a tall tower he built as a lookout point/deer stand. He goes out once a week to swap SD cards and batteries, never sees much more than animals and the occasional car on the dirt road. This goes on for months and everyone kinda forgets about it. My grandfather goes in the hospital for heart surgery, but never leaves the hospital, dying after not recovering from a coma after surgery. Things start to settle down after my grandfather's death, and I'm over to work on a computer for my mom. Dad goes and trades cards and batteries, and brings the full one back. Part of the issues they had was reading SD cards. So I load the card and flip through the several hundred pictures. I get bored and leave my mom to it. She's visibly upset and looks at my dad and says, "Do you know who that is?" He looks, says, "It looks like your dad." I look, and it does definitely look like him. Very distinctive clothing and hat, but missing his dog and gun that never left his side when in the woods. He'd been dead for over a month at the time and the cards had been changed several times, since there was only a single picture, and there would have been no way to get to where this person was without having triggered the camera several times along the way. He had not been out to their property in a few years, let alone to that part of their property. I still have no explanation for it. When I lived with an ex and her family, her dad's van was keyed very badly, so being an electrician, he decided to set up a camera overlooking the street where we parked our cars. The camera was accessible via an app which I had on my iPad, and it would pick up on movement, record it and save it, or alternatively you could watch it live. The house was just round the corner from a pub, so we just assumed it was some pissed up person mucking about on their way home. Anyway, one Saturday morning I go out to the street to see that all our cars have been keyed. I frantically check the app and there was an update at 11:30 PM, but it was just a dog walker. Myself and my girlfriend's dad check all the updates from the last 24 hours but nothing. Very strange. We thought that maybe someone could have moved the camera because it was in plain view outside of the house, so my girlfriend's dad moved it to a more subtle position. From then on, every Friday night for several weeks we'd have the iPad set up in the living room watching the camera live. Nothing happened and we soon lost all interest and forgot about it. A few months later I was on my iPad in the house on a Friday night deleting some apps when I came across the camera app. Me and girlfriend shared a joke and decided to watch it live to see if the cars would get keyed again. We were having Chinese food and watching a film and set up the iPad on a table in the corner of the room. At around midnight, my girlfriend had gone to bed and I was watching the end of the film with my dog when something caught my eye on the iPad. I'd totally forgot I'd left it running. I watched the screen as I saw what looked like an old lady walk past the house and cars. What was she doing out at this time, I thought. Something to do with the church, maybe that was opposite. Soon she disappeared out of shot as she waddled down the street. About 5 minutes later, the movie had finished and I turned all the lights off in the living room. The only light I had was the iPad screen. I picked it up and went to turn it off, but stopped when I see something on the screen. It was the old lady again, standing outside the house, just stood perfectly still staring straight into the camera. What the fuck is going on, I thought. It was terrifying. She must have stood there for a good 2 minutes before reaching one hand into her pocket and pulling an object out and walking over to my car. She then frantically started using the object on the top bonnet. Me and my dog then bolted out of the back door. I unlocked the gate and burst out into the street ready to catch this old bitch red-handed, but nothing. The street was completely empty, no old ladies, just the parked cars outside the house. I jogged up and down the street but saw nobody. There's no way she could have got away in the seconds it took me to get out of the house. Confused, I went to bed, and the next morning I told my girlfriend and her old man all about what had happened the previous night. He studied the recordings and the camera had picked it all up to her walking past originally and her walking away after she had vandalized the car and me, and my dog appearing a split second later on camera. My girlfriend's dad took the recordings to a work colleague in hope he could enhance the picture quality so we could see the lady in more detail. It worked. We got to see her in all her glory. My girlfriend's mum recognized her. She lived 2 doors down from us and regularly visited the church opposite. We used the recording and reported it to the police. My girlfriend and I split up soon after, so I don't know what happened. I certainly never saw a penny for any of the damage caused to my car. Edit, just to clear up some info that's been mentioned in the comments. When I said enhanced picture quality, I'm pretty sure he just took the video recording, slowed it down, and blew up the picture to get a better look at the woman. There was no spy shit going on to my knowledge. I honestly cannot explain how I did not see the woman walking down the street when I went outside. When I looked back at the recording, I appear on camera too after she disappears from shot. The only logical explanation is she heard me coming and dived into a bush or under a car, although surely my dog would have seen her. This incident is actually the reason why we got security cameras. My stepmom owns a little cottage up in Michigan where she grew up. We spend most of the time I'm with them in the summer at the cottage. It's in a very safe and small neighborhood. Everyone knows everyone. Of course, we always lock the doors and close the blinds and whatnot, but we always have one light on somewhere in the house so that it looks like someone's up. We all went to sleep pretty late one night and I stayed up a bit longer binging Shane Dawson conspiracy theory videos. By a bit longer I mean to 1 or 2 in the morning. By then, I was all but out, so I turned off my phone and went to sleep. The next morning, when I was brushing my hair, my stepmom said in a really nervous tone of voice, "Jack, not my dad's real name. Why is there a handprint on the kitchen window?" My dad, of course, said he didn't know. It didn't match any of our hand sizes, so it was none of us, and it was on the outside. Duh. Why would any of us go outside in the middle of the night just to touch the kitchen window? The place where the handprint was is pretty close to the ground, so we assume the person that did it was crawling or crouching to not be seen. Our doors and windows were locked and a light was on, so we think that's why nobody actually broke in. A little while later, we got security cameras. Not me, but a family friend. They live in this pretty nice community. The houses are really nice and whatnot, but all of the garage entrances and driveways are in the back and all connect to this small road. There was a string of car thefts in the area, so they put out cameras just in case. They go on a vacation for a few days, they didn't specify where, and they come back and check the cameras. There's this guy who spent a good hour walking up and down the street trying to open up all of the car doors. Not with a crowbar or anything, but just by using the handle. For the first few cars, he was just pulling the handles really hard. Maybe he thought, if he pulled hard enough they would open. But by the time he got to my family friend's house, he looked super bored and was essentially just checking if anyone had forgotten to lock their cars. It seems stupid, but just remember that this was probably the guy, or one of the guys, who were stealing all of the cars. At one point, it had actually worked. And that's just really sad. I was living and sleeping in the basement of my parents' house at the time. My father, mother, and baby sister lived there with me. I can remember that my sister was not home this particular night because she would stay at the library quite late because she was in college. I've only ever recorded myself sleeping a 4x3 of the 4 times nothing strange happened, but the one time and last time that something did happen. It was about 3 AM. I usually fall asleep about 1 AM and set up the camera before I just lay in bed, and my recorder was on this particular night. I usually sleep with the fan on and my feet off the edge of the bed because my feet get hot, so I need the fan to keep cool. I'm pretty sure I heard a loud thump sound at about 3 AM, like something had dropped and hit the floor. I didn't wake up, but my feet keep shaking, like if you're feeling anxious about something, and keep tapping your feet. As I was watching the recording, something flies in front of my camera and lands on it. When I woke and watched the video on my computer, I fast forwarded and only noticed because the camera moved all by itself with it pointing at me. I don't think my parents had came downstairs in the middle of the night, so I turned up the sound and I didn't hear it at first, but after I turned the volume to maximum, I heard a high-pitched noise myself. I had no idea what it was, but for a second I was kind of scared that I might have something else. I went to ask my parents and sister, and they said they didn't come downstairs. I stayed up one night after this and pretended I was asleep. It turns out that I had a bat that would live in my heater exhaust vent and occasionally come down and fly around my room. It's so strange because I've never heard him flying around and hitting himself off the walls. It might have been the first time it's ever came in, but it was strange for it to start coming into my room once I set up the camera. I really thought I had a bat problem, but it was just this one bat. I was relieved to know that it was just a single bat, but I was just always worried that it's been there for quite some time, and I'm shocked that I never heard it before that night. Also, I was worried it had bitten me and I would turn into a vampire. At my factory, it's on 10 acres of land in the middle of a city. It's secured by security fences and barbed wire. It's tough to get into. Delivery company said they attempted to make a delivery late on a Friday, but when we still had people working and receiving. Well, I go to the Saturday after and decide look at the front gate just in case I see anything interesting. After about 20 minutes on recorded time, a hand reaches out from the right side of the frame and then comes back at the screen and covers the camera. Imagine someone mugging you from behind. That's what it would look like. It freaked me out because I was just watching video roll and a fucking hand appears. Also, this camera is mounted 20 feet up on a hard to reach part of the building. During the weeks prior we noticed some odd things. Hand tools we thought belonged inside the factory were laying outside. Outside shed doors randomly opened, etc. We just thought it was a coincidence and the wind blew open the doors. Nope. I reviewed the rest of the property's cameras and noticed weird things just outside of the frame, like someone was hiding from the cameras, but just barely got their hand or foot caught on camera. So we put up some hidden cameras and sure enough we saw some teenagers getting through our fence somewhere and screwing around on our factory. They were literally climbing on top of the building and walking the roof line looking for a way in. They tried prying open a roof exhaust fan as a way to get in, but luckily were deterred when they saw the fan chopping away at the air. Luckily nobody was hurt and nothing valuable destroyed or stolen. We found the hole in the fence and secured it. Caught a murder on camera. Wasn't sleeping but not home at the time. Came home to cops and helicopters up the street from a property I owned. Turns out there was a fight over money owed at a dice game on the corner opposite my property the day before. Somehow the two gentlemen met back up the next day, maybe under the guise of paying the debt. One guy was driving a car and the other guy was hanging on the corner waiting for him. When the driver pulled up, the passenger hopped in the front passenger seat, shot the driver in the head, and casually got out. The car slowly rolled across the street and stopped against the curb. Cameras caught the whole thing. The passenger/shooter walked down the block toward my building, facing the camera I had pointed up the block the whole time. He then turns in front of my building and gives a full side profile still walking by, although you could tell he was nervous as he was looking around quite a bit and looking over his shoulder. He then turns the corner and goes down a side street, breaking into a sprint, which the cameras caught as well. Detectives reached out the next day and we met up at the building. We watched the whole thing and I made copies for them. Never heard anything more about it. Unrelated to cameras, I was also a witness to an attempted murder of a cab driver a year later and got to ride along with the cops as they were looking for the getaway car. We tore ass all over the neighborhood trying to find those guys. No luck that day, but the dummies used the cab driver's credit card at a convenience store on the same block they live on a few hours later, and they got caught that way. I had to testify, which was nerve-wracking. It was only a preliminary hearing and I never got called back in, so no idea what happened from there. The cab driver was at the hearing also and doing well. He was an elderly guy just making some extra money after retirement, and these scumbags set him up by calling for a cab to a dead-end area and ended up shooting him in the leg for his wallet and phone. After reading everything here, I'm adding home cameras to my dash cam buying too. Wish I had had a dash cam a few months ago. The pharmacy had it on their camera outside, which is good because I could have been in a lot of trouble if someone claimed I hit someone and left. I drove up to the stoplight in our sleepy town and a lady came walking towards my car and laid down. Just laid down right in front of my car. I honked my horn. The light went green and I was really confused. I kept honking and she got up. I decided that maybe I should do the regular thing you do with unwell people and put my car into reverse to back away slowly. Nobody was behind me. It seemed like a reasonable choice. Before I could though, she got up and tried to jump onto my car. So back away slowly didn't happen. Hit the gas fast in reverse happened. She got up screaming and tried again. Same thing again. I backed up fast and she hits road. I pulled around her on the road, left and called our town police. IDK if she was picked up. My husband told me when I got home it's an insurance scam thing. She did seem unwell though, and I hope she's getting help wherever she is. I think she should maybe rethink her life choices before she does get hit. If she did this to one of the more common vehicles here, semis, farm equipment trucks, she's going to end up like ground beef. Not while I was asleep, but I was home alone one day blasting music in my room. My dog was sitting on my staircase where she could see the front door, and my room is right at the top of the stairs. When the song ended, I heard my front door open. We have an alarm system, and when a door or window opens, it goes beep beep, and then I heard my dog growling, like I've never heard before. My gut knew it wasn't a family member. My dad was out of town and my mom and sister were gone. I texted my mom saying, "Where are you?" And she said she was at the store. I called the police and hid in my closet. I live in a safe area and they took 20 minutes to come to my house. The operator stayed on the phone with me and told me to stay quiet. When the police and my mom finally got back home, we checked the security cameras. The footage glitched right when the person came into the front door, so all we could see was a tall black silhouette. The light was shining in from behind him. Never found out who it was, but they must have left when they either saw my dog or heard that someone was home. Edit. I actually just remembered one that did happen at night. 2 high school kids went around my neighborhood at night stealing things from people's cars. They stole my mom's purse out of her car and used her card at the nearby McDonald's, and they were caught from McDonald's security cameras because we couldn't make out their faces in our footage. Early one morning many years ago, I got a call from my buddy across the street. "Get over here. You've got to see this." So I get over there, and we get into his office and pull up the previous night's security footage on his computer. He had installed one to keep an eye out for a vengeful ex-friend who had been going onto his property and vandalizing things. He begins to fast forward the video and pauses around the 3 AM mark. At first there wasn't much going on, but gradually we began to see signs of movement in the shadows of his neighbor's front lawn. All of a sudden, a very tall, pasty white man with a beard and long straggly hair stepped out of the shadows and stood on the sidewalk in front of my friend's house and stood staring at the street. "What the fuck?" I said. "Is he naked?" My friend shook his head. "Keep watching." The man stepped all the way in front of the house, where he was now illuminated by a nearby street lamp. I could see that he was wearing a pair of briefs that were nearly as white as he was. "Who is this guy? I've never seen him around here before," I said. "Me neither." "Keep looking. It gets better." Indeed it did. Abruptly, the man turned and faced the house for several moments, then began to slowly creep up the driveway towards the front door in a highly exaggerated manner that immediately brought to mind Elmer Fudd hunting Warbits. He then stared at the front door for a full 10 minutes and moved over to tap on the front windows a few times before noticing the light of the security camera. He approached it and appeared to wiggle it around a bit before tiring of it and moving over to the side of the house. It had been a trash pickup day and my friend had not yet moved his empty can to the backyard. We could see the man kinda fumbling with something, but between the relative darkness and an obscuring palm frond we couldn't tell what he was doing. Our question was soon answered when he wandered back into the center of the yard with the empty 50-gallon garbage can over his head. All you could see was his pale legs. He kind of roamed around aimlessly for a few moments, even ducking down entirely into the can when a passing car went by. He soon tired of the garbage can, pulled it off, and rolled it down the driveway, where it came to rest against the car. The strange placement of the garbage can in the morning being what had prompted my friend to check his cameras in the first place. For his final act, the man approached the small orange tree in the corner of the yard, plucked off a few of the larger fruits, and started trying to juggle them. The first two dropped straight to the ground, and he just stared at the one still in his hand for a long moment, before slinging it as hard as he could across the street. He then kicked the other two across the yard. He stood there for a few seconds more, as if just realizing where he was, and wondering how he got there. Then he shuffled off screen and out of sight. A few minutes later he showed up again, this time across the street, and heading back in the direction he had come. He had the orange he had previously thrown there in his hand. We lost sight of him in the dark, but as he was turning the corner we could just barely make him out reflected in another street